right, welcome everybody. This is Massey Ventures workshop, Monday evening workshop, and tonight we're really lucky to have Kenneth from Scale Story with us. And I met him, what was that, a couple months ago, and it was really interesting what he was talking about. One of the things that I find is a real challenge for a startup or any business is telling your story in a way that's compelling. And so if you're a startup, you need to tell one compelling story to your customers in order to get your customers, and then you need to tell another compelling story to investors if you're looking for investment. And that's what Kenneth does. And I'm going to read this because we decided this was really good. So his work has contributed to significant outcomes, including supporting founders in raising millions in funding and gaining major media exposure, while championing the idea that the most effective founders don't just build products, but lead with compelling stories and connect and convert. Thank you for joining us this evening, Kenneth, and take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm going to need to update my own intro because I can't match that. I can't match that. I appreciate you all for joining. I know it's the evening, so we'll try and keep the energy high. And I'm going to make a couple of promises at the very beginning. The first promise is we'll make this as interactive as possible, so it's not just you sat here listening to a bored guy in the middle of the night. And the second thing that I'm going to promise you guys is that by the end of this workshop, you will have a framework to be able to action straight away. So we can dive straight into what storytelling is and all those wonderful things. But those are my two promises. And if I don't deliver on them, it's recorded so you can hold me to it. Cool. Let's dive in with our favorite question of the year, which is, can you see my slides? Can you do a thumbs up if that works, just so I know we're here. Cool, wicked. Awesome. So, founder-led storytelling that raises capital. I will do a bit of intro about myself shortly, but I think just to kind of give you a bit of insight into the things that I mentioned just now, the three main areas that we're going to be looking at for this workshop is identifying narrative friction. So where is it that when you're sharing your narrative with investors, key stakeholders, potential hires, strategic partners, all of that realm, where things are slowing down, the way in which you're going to be able to eliminate that, and how to create a narrative proxy, how to create a system in which all of these things start to move with a bit more purpose and a bit more fluidity. So that's what we're going to cover. Before we dive in, and feel free to use the chat for this one, I'm interested to know who's looking at or in the process of preparing for meaningful growth in the next sort of 3 to 6 months. So that might be a fundraise, that might be hiring some top tier talent, it might be expanding to new markets. If you drop in the chat one of the things that you're doing, what would be another one? Closing enterprise partnerships. Let's have a little look here. Anthony's currently raising pre-seed. How much are you looking to raise in your pre-seed?
200,000 euros.
200,000 euros. That's change for you in Barcelona. That's easy for you. I'm going to make sure that's a seamless process. Anyone else within the next sort of 3-6 months looking to change their stress levels?
1.5 million.
1.5 million. And you're going to have that raised within the next 3 to 6 months?
We are in progress, and we want to close in September.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, cool. So fundraising. Are there any others, just to make sure that because I want to make sure that we kind of cover what's relevant to the people that are on the call as well. Outside of fundraising, is any other meaningful growth that's happening for people? Yeah, Latin, go for it.
I was on mute, sorry. So I am looking for growth, but is it like more of like an investor slash partner, if that is even an option? Because I don't think you mentioned that as an option.
Go for it.
Yeah, just like a partner that kind of grows with the business. We're not looking for like the traditional type of pre-seed fundraising type of investors, but that is something we are looking at in the next 6 months. So I don't know if that counts as an option.
So you're talking about someone to partner with to help you raise capital?
No, just a partner to bring on in the team.
Okay.
But the partner would have to have the capital to let us grow to the extent that we want. So obviously an investor, but it's not the traditional. It's not the same as what's being the list that you gave. I don't know if that fits into that category. It's a different type of category.
It's significant growth. It's a milestone. That I just gave off some of the top ones off the top of my head. So
okay, yeah. That's more what I'll be looking for when that time comes. So this would be a very useful workshop for me. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Good. Right. So I'll try and keep those and reference them where available. Gokhan said he's raising 450K, so $500,000 USD. I imagine that's also sort of pretty going to seed. So yeah, awesome. These are really, really good things. Spoiler alert for the whole presentation. Many of the things that will cause you friction at some point along this journey are going to be down to your narrative, but we'll dive into those as we proceed. So here's a quote that I live by. Early stage startups rarely fail because of the product. Now, I think when you say this, a lot of people think, well, actually, if you've got a really good product, then investors are going to love you, and then you can raise your 400K, 250, 1.5 million, whatever the number is, because the product is great. But the difficulty in the world of startups is nothing is ever really new, nothing is ever really unique. The actual driving force and founding force behind what it is that you're building is a iteration of something that's already been built, right? It's your unique angle and your unique perspective. So where startups tend to fail is in their ability to communicate that to other people. And it's not always investors. Sometimes it might be a strategic partner that you need to grow. Sometimes it might be senior talent that you need to hire. If they don't understand what it is that you're building, they're not going to come along on the journey. So I want you to keep this in mind as we go through as to how your positioning currently is, and seeing how we can shift that to one that makes you one of the early stage startups that doesn't fail and actually thrives. We're moving from a space of having like 400 ideas and distilling them down into one. And the better we get at really honing in that one example is where we really start to see change happen. So if you look at this year, and I know some of you are raising capital, some of you may have kind of started some early conversations. Up until this point, much of being a startup founder was ambition. It was about being the loudest and the most brash and the person that really could say, I'm going to take this startup to the moon. You needed to have like a unicorn mentality with no team, no capital, and really and truly no real product, which is a really hard thing to manage. The shift that's happened in 2026 and after the kind of, the evolution of AI is, in actuality, the ambitious founders are great, but they're not cutting it. People aren't able to raise, they're not able to kind of grow in meaningful ways. And the main reason is that we're in a space where people need to be de-risking. People are very interested in de-risking. You'll see it all across, specifically Europe more than anything. US still has a bit more of an ambitious appetite, but across Europe, the stories that are being told and the companies that are really growing are very good at sharing how they are de-risking what's happening. So this is one piece of hidden friction that's happening. Another piece to kind of note is the fact that you will find yourself constantly repeating your story to many different people when you're going to events, when you're coming onto workshops like this, and you have to say, this is me and this is what I'm building. And you want to find a way to systemize that in a way that doesn't cause more pain, doesn't cause more issue, doesn't have 17 different versions. Because what that leads to is lengthened conversations where you're explaining in 3 or 4 different conversations to get to the point of being able to do a deal, partnerships eventually not landing, and what we internally call this is the messy middle. It's this area of you're in this growth stage, you understand what you want to be, but you're really struggling to get other people to understand that, and that is going to slow everything that you're doing by way of how you are strategically growing quite significantly. So, who is this guy that's telling you all of this stuff about growing startups and how they work? Well, I'm the founder of a company called Scale Story. As Martha mentioned, we essentially create founder stories that raise capital, which is the tagline that we use, kind of the overarching umbrella. But ultimately, our really big goal is to create stories and understand and engineer how they are understood. And the result of that is, as you can see, 2.4x investor response increase. Because when investors understand what it is that you're doing, then the better conversations start to happen. Tier one press and government signal, which is ultimately basically being picked up by news outlets and top tier major outlets to say, hey, look, there's some real good traction happening with this startup. And we really, really want to see what's happening there. And we're sort of engineering that in the background. And the last kind of really big thing for us is that we are 100% focused on founder narratives. It's not to say that startups aren't interesting or startups aren't interesting and the body of the company isn't interesting. It 100% is part of that story. However, we focus it on the perspective of the founder, how it is that they see the future, how it is that they are shaping that, and the team that they have behind them. In summary, we are obsessed with telling stories that make sure that people are able to get to their next milestones simpler, faster, and with much more credibility. At its core, it's a video production agency. So we do get founders in front of cameras, much like today, sharing their stories. But as a starting step, we really help people build the narrative, because without the narrative, there is no cameras, there's no lights, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. I myself used to have a lot of hair when I was younger, but I spent 10 years in the marketing space, and therefore much of that has gone. The short version of that kind of 10-year period was I started off with a camera, working with business owners on their products and services, and very quickly realized that I was not in any way, shape or form really interested in filming products and services all the time. Going to a restaurant and saying, hey, I can film your restaurant, and having to do fake smiles while someone puts out a plate. It's great work for those that do it, but it wasn't really kind of enticing for me. So after a while of kind of repeating doing this in many different industries, I started to ask the business owners, like, why did they start the business? And they would share these wonderful stories about, it's a family-run business that's been going for 100 years, and some of the recipes haven't been tweaked since 1930, whatever. And I started saying, well, you should tell this part of the story way more than the plates that were showing in slow motion. So we started off by showing the product and then a little bit of the founder story, and then said, actually, do you know what, it makes more sense to start with who the person is and then show the plates after. And then slowly but surely it then became a really big focus on, do you know what, the story behind this restaurant, the story behind this product or service, whatever it was, is way more interesting. Fast forward into kind of like the midpoint, about 5 years ago, I was introduced to a lot of startups where somebody could have no restaurant, no food, no product, no service, no team, no money, no nothing. And they would look me in the eye and say, we're on track to raise £5 million. And I'd say, this is insane. Sign me up. What do we need to do? And that's basically where the journey of kind of working with startups started, really kind of specializing within the kind of seed to Series A space, which is the messy middle, the messiest of messy middles, helping them kind of go and navigate through that path. All of the stats here are all vanity metrics by way of like the experience, the amount of hours of content and the projects. What I think is really kind of key to kind of understand here is that you won't find any companies, you won't find any spaces that are like the startup or scale up space. And I'm fascinated and obsessed by it because it is the only space where narrative can take you from 0 to 1 to 1 million. You can't do that in any other space as effectively. So you've all made a very, very, even though it might feel like it all the time, wise choice to say, I'm diving into this with 2 hands. So that's a little bit of a story about who I am and where my background comes from. Now let's get back into what we're talking about today, which is narratives that get funding. Because ultimately what it is that we're doing is we're shifting from talking about features to talking about the vision that you have. Moving from what it does to why it's going to win. And the last thing would be stopping saying, well, this is how it works, and explaining to people why it's happening now. These 3 things kind of seem a little bit underrated, maybe by way of me just saying them, but these are the shifts that will take you from, as you go from bootstrap, pre-seed to seed to Series A, you'll recognize that the story stays the same, but the context around it changes. So I want to give to you today is all of the gems from the stages above to say, start using them now. Get ahead of everyone in your space, because really and truly it's a tough world out there. So let's make sure it's a little bit easier. So shall we explore some narrative friction? Traction doesn't create conviction. I think this is something that, just to pause on it for a second, there are a lot of people who are of the belief that if they build a B2B SaaS product and they can say, look, we've got 100 customers, they're all paying, our churn is 4% and we are off to the races. They believe if they show that to an investor, or if they show that to a partner to say, hey, look, this is where we're at, someone's going to sign a check immediately. And the difficulty with that is that it used to be true many years ago. But now the question is, well, what if someone else does it faster or better? Because we have AI, we've got vibe coding, we've got all of the things that make this so difficult. And the other thing that kind of makes that slow down is your ability or inability to share how important it is that you are the right person to do that. So you have things like growth signals without narrative framing. You're not really showing what the future looks like. Showing the updates of where you're at, but not really conveying any inevitability, why you should be the person to do this above anyone else who could vibe code it, whatever it may be. Momentum exists, but it doesn't convert. Ultimately, the framing in what you're saying, of what you're saying, it doesn't show up in a way that people can be energized and say, okay, well, these numbers make sense, but what do the next steps look like? So if you're in a space, whether you started, reaching out to people in any way, shape or form, and you're finding that you're not getting the responses that you expect, or there's a bit of a stall or delay, there is a gap in the belief of where you're at and where you're trying to get to. So this will only be true until we're able to build that belief. There are, I guess, 3 points here. Founders who close faster don't explain better in the room. A lot of founders will say, once you get me in the room, I'm going to be great. I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be able to do everything I need to do. But you're not always going to be able to be in the room. In fact, most of the conversations that happen that are going to get you funded, that are going to get you a deal across the line, happen without you being in the room. So you've got to be really, really good at giving someone a very clear message of, this is who I am, this is what I'm building, and this is why it's so important that we move quickly and we move with some sense, basically. Defining who you are for and who you're not for. Most founders wait till they get to about late seed to start defining who they're not for. We typically say, this works for everyone and anyone. We can work with all of these verticals and all of these people. But in a world where generalists are everywhere, doing the best, you can be a quiet generalist who shouts as a specialist. And that will make you stand out from the fold, because in actuality, anyone can build anything at this point. And then committing to one direction long enough. This is something that will show up in your narrative by way of, if you look at the first pitch deck you've ever made, through to the last 14 revisions that you made last week, you will see that there is a common thread, or there should be a common thread, in what you're aiming to do. And if there's been pivots and there's been changes, is there an overarching umbrella? Because what you will find is anyone that partners with you now or in the future, they just want to know that you will still be around in 5 years, in 10 years, because no one's got interest in partnering with somebody, regardless whether it's for cash, regardless whether it's for growth of a team, whatever the case may be, if that relationship is only going to last 3, 6, 9, 12 months. So your goal is to really say, hey, we've been on this journey for the longest time. We understand all of the road bumps. And more importantly, we will not stop until we've conquered our mission, which should be very clear at this point. So ultimately what I'm saying on this slide is basically, I want you to look at building belief that precedes the meetings. Before you walk into a room, someone should know who you are, what you're about, and have a bit of an understanding about what you do. If any of you, I guess from signing up to this, you may have looked at my own LinkedIn or the website, so you've got a little bit of context. All of that obviously is engineered. The idea that you have an idea of what I do is because I've written it. Do the same thing, steal it, and make sure that people are excited to talk about you before they meet you. Your biggest unfair edge will always be your narrative. forever be your narrative, because I can talk to you from pre-seed all the way to IPOing or whatever type of exit that you're looking at. The narrative is going to be the thing that gets people excited, the thing that gets people riled up to say, hey, do you know what? We're backing the right person, because this person really believes in what I believe in. This person has championed other people. This person's worked tirelessly at the same thing. In actuality, they deserve this. If you have all of these things in your head, or if any of these things resonate with you, but you know they're not being said out loud, the difficulty is no one else will know. It sounds maybe for some weird to kind of talk about yourself or to blow your own horn. For others, it might come a little bit easier. But one thing that is always going to be true is that the narrative is going to be created whether you say it or somebody else says it. My personal preference is to get in front of everyone. And at an early stage, I think we can all look at this from the early stage perspective. You are the driving force behind all of the things that we're talking about here. So when we look at how you are able to shape and change the narrative in a Fortune 500 company, for someone to do a statement, it has to be signed off by a whole PR team, and it might take 4 to 5 business days. If you want to make a post on LinkedIn today, no one needs to sign it off besides yourself. You can run rings around huge companies, which we'll get into a little bit later on. You are the signal, you are the moat, you are the person that really is driving this mission forward. And you shouldn't wait for a check to define that. You shouldn't wait for a partnership to define that. You should start talking as if you're already there, because the greatest startups talk about tomorrow as if it were today. Just gonna quick check this message. What if you have obstacles that prevent you from sharing your narrative at this current stage? I love this question. What I'm gonna do is, we've just got one small section just after this, and I will answer it, if that's okay, Leland, just after this next section. So we're good for time, but I'll hold it. It's a very good question. So quick 2-minute exercise. Feel free to write in the chat, or if you want to share publicly, we can have a little bit of a discourse about it. Where do you think the narrative friction is happening for yourself? We've discussed a lot about what it looks like, broadly speaking. But if you were to look at your own self right now, in the last sort of 3 to 6 months, call it 3 months actually, where have you felt that things might be slowing down, where investor reach outs are not happening in the time span that you expected them to? You're getting objections a lot when looking out to speak to people, having to re-explain over and over again within the same conversation, having to do heavy lifting with demos, those sorts of things. So I'll give you a couple of options of 3 things that we commonly see. So the first one being investor interest, obviously. The second one being the repeat objections that I mentioned. And the third one being clear narrative. Where is momentum leaking? And if anyone's brave, as I mentioned, feel free to unmute and tell me a story. Big fan of stories.
Yeah, I don't mind sharing. Yeah, I think I would fall into the investor interest category. Just being a pre-seed, getting my foot in the door is probably the biggest challenge I find. I get a lot of momentum when I'm able to get in the room and convince people to get on board. But being pre-revenue, pre-seed, it's just that initial opening, getting my foot in the door is the biggest challenge, I'd say.
Once you're in the room and you say you're able to kind of convert them, what is it that you're saying that makes them light up or makes them say, hey, this is the horse to back?
I think it's my my vision for what it can be and the opportunity there's tremendous growth in the sector. I think that kind of opportunity, then I think I come across quite passionately. And I think it's probably those 2 things if I had to pin it down. Yeah.
So it's your passion for what you're building and the size of the opportunity, which is basically ROI for investors, right? Showing that ROI. Right. How much of this are you sharing publicly?
About my fundraising journey, or about those things that are helping me convert?
things that helping you convert, the size of the opportunity, what the market currently looks like, your unique perspective on it.
So I just did for the first time a newsletter last week, where I think definitely the passion part comes out and kind of our narrative around the other founders as well and our dynamic. But it's been recently. Yeah, and very little I would say to this point, but trying to pick it up.
Would you say, or would you be of the mindset that if you would share more about the element that converts privately, more publicly, you might see a bit more traction?
Yeah, probably.
I'd say the advantage that you've got here is you've already got data on what works. So where you say you're at pre-seed and it's hard to open the door, two things come to mind. Number one, there are VCs and angel units that will essentially only look at pre-seed. So being pre-seed actually really isn't so much of a problem. And pre-revenue, again, it's kind of expected at pre-seed. Some people are going to have some revenue, but it's typically very little. You're not covering the cost of a full team. So go in with that expectation of, okay, this is where we are today, but the size of the opportunity is so massive, you'd be silly to wait. And that framing, that passion that you have driving that framing is really what I think will open a lot more doors for you, without you needing to do much more than what you're already doing. So there's a really easy win there that I think you could take forward and drive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thanks a lot.
Cool, awesome. Anyone else?
I'm happy to speak up if that's okay.
Please and thank you.
Good evening. Hey, Kenneth. Thanks for hearing about your story and your journey. I mean, I echo a little bit of Anthony. So here at Formatter, we're also pre-seed, but just starting to get initial revenue, but have pretty good traction in terms of app installs and things like that, partnerships and a little bit of B2B so far. But I think where I'm losing momentum maybe is in the clear narrative, because I do quite a bit. So I'm in the ed tech sphere. I'm a professor and also, a founder. And so I speak, my target markets are college students, university students, and researchers. And I do quite a bit of speaking between my teaching and things like that. And I guess for me, I'm solving a very specific problem. And I think maybe people have expectations that my app does everything. Like some of the other apps are already out there. Is it like ChatGPT? Is it like, whatever, that it can do everything? And I was in a conversation today, and a student kept asking me, okay, so what does it do exactly? Okay, this. And I kept being very specific about what it does. And I think they just have an expectation that it should do more. And I'm trying to stress that this is actually a really painful problem. And it does, it solves the problem.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe that's where I'm losing a bit of momentum, maybe with the clear narrative. I don't know.
Yeah. So there's a bit of friction in terms of people understanding that what it is today is purpose built and it's designed to be as it is, but the expectation is much higher. It's basically the disconnect that you're talking about, right?
Yes, exactly.
Cool. You have the first thing you've got going for you, which is a lot less common than people would believe, is a lived experience. There are many founders who come up with ideas and say, look, I'm going to change the world. And they have no idea about the sector or the industry, no past experience other than they hired someone who can code really well. You, on the other hand, have lived the experience, can talk about the pain from a personal perspective and understand why it needs to be built in the way it's built. So typically, you'll find that when someone is hooked on saying, okay, but can it do this and can it do that and can it do this? It's not so much them poking holes at what you've built, but more so them lacking the ability to see what it will look like in the future. Because at pre-seed, you've not got the full MVP. It's not, product market fit isn't there. So what they're basically asking for is the product market fit. Like right now it does this, but what happens when you've got millions and millions of pounds? So the way that I take that question would be really gracefully and really excited to say, look, where we're at right now is we're solving for this specific problem. As you said, it's your lived experience and this is what you want to do to help that and to kind of overcome that. However, the future we see is one which take the pain point, and then you say it's eradicated. Now, what that looks like by way of the app and what it's shaped doesn't make a difference. I'm not saying that to say as in forget about it, but more so, you don't need to convince someone of the fact that the app is going to grow and develop once they've understood that you're building for a future where this pain point no longer exists at all, because you have diligently worked towards making sure that it's gone. And that removes that sort of back and forth of like, okay, but are you going to put it in AI on the side? Like, we're going to fix the problem. Whether it's through AI, whether it's through in-person lectures, doesn't matter what the format or shape is, we are solving for this one problem.
Mhm.
How does that feel as a reframe?
That actually sounds really good. As I said, I have a lot of opportunities to actually speak directly to kind of my target market, just given that I also continue to teach. Yeah, that makes sense. Then this is what it does today. I feel this pain as a researcher trying to publish, and but we see that in the future, this is what it could be applied to, and this is what it will solve, let's say, something like that.
Exactly. And another thing I'll give you just there, try it because you've got ample opportunity to try this out. And this is kind of advice for everyone. Try and see what happens when you don't answer the question fully. So when you say to someone, right now it looks like this, and in the future we're going to eradicate this pain point, and then just be totally silent. You'll find that people start to fill in the gaps for you. And they'll say, oh, so it's going to do this, this, and this. 90% of the time, it's not going to be something you're going to do. But there might be a 10% of the time where you go, I hadn't actually thought of that. And you go away and you scribble it down, and that might be the biggest unlock for product market fit. So your job is not only to kind of help people see the vision, but also to kind of understand, as you are doing, that market research that's constantly happening. Use it, leverage it as much as possible.
Thank you.
Awesome. Lauren, you had your hand up.
Sorry, yes. So for me, I would say the biggest friction I have is surprisingly my story. I think it's my biggest obstacle, which hence why I asked that question about the obstacle. I managed to successfully build and launch something and get it to a point where we are growing slowly. And the biggest obstacle I have and the biggest friction I have, and it's like, that door that I'm trying to get through, is just getting that story out there, and I can't. So any advice on how to manage that would be useful. I know you said you'll answer that at the end, but that is one of the frictions I have. And then also it is another friction that would also stop me from being able to share that story for when I am ready to look for an investor, a partner to help me grow this to the next stage. So
Mhm.
that would
Can
be
I
very
ask,
useful.
without obviously sensitive towards the information that you can share, so please
Yeah.
listen in a way that makes sense or not.
Mhm.
What is preventing you from talking about it publicly in its entirety, or can you talk about it in segments?
I can just briefly, I am in employment, so I am under a contract. So for that reason, I can't use my face. So I actually managed to successfully do this without putting my face on anything. And surprisingly, the company got invited to a book launch where one of our members actually said that the work we're doing is so essential. So imagine what I could do if I just get the story out there, which I can't. So that's one of the obstacles I have. So any advice on that would be very useful.
Sure. We're going to talk in hypotheticals here.
Right.
Hypothetically,
Mm.
if the company were to take off and that coincided with you potentially leaving your space of work to then take the company forward, hypothetically,
Right.
then this barrier would be gone.
Mhm.
The reason why I said I'll answer your question after is because I unintentionally have a slide dedicated just to this. So
Mm.
let's do that. Let's explore it. So
Okay,
I'll answer your
cool.
question in a longer way, but I'll come back to it in a short form at the very end to make
Okay.
that make sense,
Okay.
right? So to answer Lauren's question, it's with a case study. So this is Sam Jones. Sam Jones I've worked with Sam for the past 5 years now. So he is the person I mentioned at the start where I said, look, this is somebody that wants to raise 5 million. It wasn't a joke. It genuinely was what happened. It started off with raising 1 million and then very quickly realized that he kind of needed to raise 5 million. to be able to grow and have the rapid growth that he needed. Sam's built a company called Generate. Generate helps people, empowers people to earn and control their data while browsing.
Yeah, I've seen that one. I know that company. It's really
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah.
So their stories are kind of you could say they're powered by Scale Story, but yeah, I've basically worked with Sam to help engineer what it is that's happening by way of that story when it comes to raising capital, finding stuff, all of the things that Scale Story does. Now, what's interesting about Sam is there is a lot that happened publicly. So the bridge version is Sam went on Dragon's Den, and he had the opposite of what people typically have. You go on a show at Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, whatever the kind of other equivalents are, and pitched his company and explained the open secret within the advertising industry is that basically your data is being sold without you knowing. And that resonated with a large group of people because one, there was education on something that people didn't understand or know. And number two, he had a solution. There is a future in which this pain no longer exists, and we are engineering that future. Now, what was really interesting is Sam overnight was overwhelmed with the responses from Dragon's Den. The pitch went viral. He was then cited on, I think it was BBC News, Sky, and BBC Good Morning, all within the space of 24 hours. So overloads of servers, lots of things crashed. It was a wonderful bittersweet moment of too much fame within a second. And we sat down and kind of spoke about the fact that he's got these 15 minutes of fame, which has been great. But after that, you get the peak in the graph and then it drops down to normal again. Nothing happens. And the main thing that people were really, really attached to was the fact that they really enjoyed his pitch and really enjoyed the way that he spoke about data and made it human. So what we created and engineered was a series of content essentially that helped continue to share that same story of how it is that you could navigate the internet safer, how it is you could protect yourself from data brokers, what an actual data broker is, breaking down all of these things in simple terms. Some of them were 1 to 2 minute videos, other times it was going on keynotes and stages, but ultimately the core foundation of everything that he did and that he was doing was telling the same story. Now, what's interesting about Sam's story is the story that he told investors and the story that he told the public weren't too dissimilar. There's like a 10-20% change in terms of one looks at ROI and the other one looks at ROI to the individual. So with that, what we got really good at was saying, okay, what is our core story? How can we bounce off that? We'll use that as a springboard. I think a lot of founders, what they tend to do is say, okay, well, I've got this core story, but now I need to talk about this thing over here and explain this thing over here. And it's like, no, go back to the core. What are you solving for? And if everything you put out online, whether it's an image, a video, a text post, no matter what it is, if someone reads it, do they think I am being empowered to control or earn from my data? That is the bottom line. The reason why I share this with you is the fact that this then resulted in, and if you want videos or anything like that, you can have a look at the website. There's a whole case study, so you can look at the videos themselves. I won't waste time here sharing them. Sam had attention. He had a decent story, but didn't have a system to be able to kind of push that narrative out. Once we built that system and were able to action it, it resulted in him, he was invited to speak at the Web Summit. Is 3 times now, actually. He spoke to the Prime Minister at Downing Street, who at the time was Rishi. As a result of that conversation, they invited him to join the Smart Data Council, which didn't exist prior to that meeting. The Smart Data Council is basically all of the clever minds behind what's happening with data within the UK, especially since Brexit, and they basically advise on how that is, how things have moved forward, how legislation is passed. He won British Entrepreneur of the Year. Oh, there's a tongue tie there. Spoke at BBC, which I mentioned. It's now been a bunch of times, actually, to be honest, because it's BBC Radio and TV. Sky News, as I mentioned, was featured in all of these major outlets. I'm not saying this to blow my own horn and say, I did all these wonderful things, look how great I am. It's not my belief at all. I'm saying this to say, somebody started sharing their story of the thing that they were passionate about over and over again, and it opened all of these doors. Now, from a public point of view, this is great. If you're in a position where you can't share it publicly, and this goes to your point, Alan, about how it is that you do this, there's another thing that we did in the background that we don't often talk about too much, not for any other reason other than time. But what I'll share with you today is sharing your story doesn't always have to be B2C focused. In fact, one of the most powerful tools that you can use is storytelling to your B2B partners and to investors. Because if you can share with them the journey that you're on, the things that you've seen, and why you are uniquely equipped to navigate this path, it never has to leave anything besides your inbox. So one of the things that we do every single quarter, we did another one 2 days ago now. I think it's posted on Sam's LinkedIn today, is we post a quarterly update, and it essentially is a wrap of what's been happening in that quarter, what the milestones have been hit, what the future looks like, headwinds, tailwinds, all that kind of stuff. And we upload it to YouTube as a private video, and it goes in an email to investors. And it's a 4-line email that says, hey, investor name, or if it's just a group email, hey all, just want to give you a quick update on what's been happening in our world. The top highlights are whatever major thing has happened within the last 3 months. And then attached, you can kind of put your quarterly report, which is 8,000 pages of documents that no one's ever really going to read, unless they're the accountant of said investor. Totally different conversation for another day for somebody else. The point of it is no one will click the document willingly, but everyone will click the video out of curiosity. So you can engineer these stories in a way where if you can't, because of work, because of other commitments, or because your industry has sensitive information, so you're looking at deep tech, life sciences, things that defense as well, things that can alter people's perspective of how the world works. These are definitely things that you can be doing to say, okay, well, this is just a private link to 20, 25 people that we know it's going to be safe. And if at any point things get wild, it's a private link that you can delete, disable, do whatever you want. So those are kind of the avenues that you can take it down if needed. If you can do both, it's a double win, because the investors get the ROI version for them. This is a size opportunity, and the public gets an update on this is what's happening for you, and we're building more for you. So
thank you.
It's all good. It's all good. In summary, for Sam and for many of you, the product won't change, the framing will. So if you get really good at the framing from a very, very early stage, then you've beat the market. I alluded to this a little bit earlier on, but I just want to kind of hone in on this. The idea that if you don't own your own narrative, someone else will. And I'll give you a really easy example of this. Earlier on, I did an introduction of myself. I explained what the business is and my own personal experience. Without that context, everyone here has an idea of who this guy in a cardigan is and if he's really real or not. Has he really got the credibility that he mentions to have? I'm not really sure. And it's not because any of you are bad people. It's because our brains assume the worst before we assume the best. We don't walk around thinking, that's a really nice person, that's a really nice person. We're quite cautious, and more so in business. That in itself is a narrative. So when it is that you're reaching out to people, you want to give them as much possibility to leverage information that you've put out as possible. Because if you were to Google me, for example, right now, you will see a list of things that I've done, podcasts, keynotes, things like that, all around founder-led storytelling. And that gives positive signal to say, this is the journey that this person is on, therefore I might be able to trust them, therefore there might be an opportunity to do more things. If you were to Google me and you find that I don't know, work at a circus on a Friday, I do fire breathing on a Sunday, I sometimes work with founders, I sometimes work with SMEs, these kind of blur the vision, and therefore the trust drops. So the big push here basically is to say, own your narrative as soon as possible and be proud of it. Whether it's public or private, I don't mind, but start being the person that says, hey, before you get to know me, get to know me. Cool. Does that all make sense up to this point? I know we're kind of really fast.
Yeah. That does make sense. That was actually very useful in advice, actually. Thank you.
Cool. No problem. Let's move on to some frameworks that we can actually use, because I've done a lot of talking, which the promise was not to do much of it. So, the CLEAR framework. This is basically our internal stress test for kind of our late seed and Series A founders, in being able to understand what I mentioned earlier on. We talked about springboarding from that foundation of, okay, this is your narrative, this is the mission that you have. Are we staying clear to it? To make sure that we stay clear to it, we have 5 different points that we follow. Nice little acronym, so it's nice and memorable. It helps you do less is more. And using this framework will basically counteract all of the negative things that happen when we're trying to share our narratives. So, build belief in 5 steps. Step number 1 is your claim. What are you really building and why now? I'm going to make up a fake company, and we're going to use, because it's the closest thing to me, this bottle. So let's say I'm the founder of this bottle, and let's say what it does is it's able to regulate temperatures for 7 days in a row. Who cares why? That is what it's doing, right? So what is my claim? This is the first bottle that can hold water for more than 7 days. Typically, bottles can do more than no more than 2 days. So that is what I'm building. Why is that important now? Why should anyone care, considering we've had bottles for many, many years? No one wants another water bottle. And I could say something like, there is a rise in the amount of ultra runners that are running through the Sahara Desert, most of them having fatal, so on and so forth, because they're not able to access water at a regulated temperature. Again, I've just made that up, but this is to show you how easy it is to just make a claim that is real. Don't make false claims, but understanding this is what I'm doing, this is why it's important. Second thing is leverage. Where must this belief compound first? It's great to get your message out, but your message does not need to be heard by everyone. Not everyone is your consumer, not everyone is your customer, not everyone is your partner, not everyone is your investor. You should be very selective about who you're trying to reach, to the point that when you are speaking, you should be able to talk to them and talk directly to their pain points. So with that in mind, if you are raising capital, it would need to compound first with investors, and therefore the messaging needs to talk about ROI and what the size of the opportunity looks like. If it needs to compound first with, for example, you're trying to get traction with users, then you need to show a really compelling vision of what you're building and how they can be an early adopter. But you need to leverage that as soon as possible within your messaging. What is your unfair edge? What is the advantage that you have that currently isn't being communicated? So one of the things that we mentioned earlier on with Kyle was the fact that he has a lived experience within the space and is actively working with students. This might seem like a very simple thing to say, but it's never assumed. People don't assume that founders know their market better than anyone else. They just assume that you're trying to make money. And whether that's, you know, the forefront or the back end of things, it doesn't really matter. You need to communicate the part that people don't understand, why you are the person to lead this company to the future, and you'll do so better than anyone else. Number 4 is your authority. The proof that compounds conviction. Do you have any early traction? This is typically where people start, right? We put this a little bit later on, but do you have any early traction? Do we have comparable things within the market that we can look at? And if you have neither of those things, then we look towards the future and say, okay, look, there's going to be a shift, a change, a paradigm shift where things aren't going to look like they are currently, and we are working towards that. Or there is some sort of negative catalyst that has been working for many, many years, and we are trying to change that narrative, and we're the first to do it because everyone else has failed, because they haven't tried. But what is the proof that shows us actually, yeah, this is really important? And the last thing is, how do you reinforce this? Reinforcing can look many different ways. I'm not here to preach to you that you should all do video, because ultimately it doesn't always work for everyone. We're quite selective with who we work with. And for that reason, I don't say go and do video. However, my big thing here is you want to make sure that using as many touch points to get your message out there. LinkedIn is a great one, obviously, for investment, but YouTube could be another great tool by way of being able to kind of showcase and educate what it is that you're doing by way of long form. If you've got like a D2C brand, for example, or e-commerce, then TikTok might be a better avenue. It doesn't really matter what platform you use. I personally would just say, kind of looking at, you know, who your target audience is, find a way to reinforce it as much as you can over and over and over again. Because you're never going to stop telling your story. You're never going to stop sharing what it is that you do and why you're passionate about it. But you do want to make sure that it is going to the right spaces. Don't tell your story in a corner where no one can hear you, because it's just a waste of energy. Do find ways where it's going to multiply and be reinforced. So to make sure this makes sense, I want us to spend a little bit of time, and I should have mentioned at the start, which is my mistake. If you have got pen and paper, or it's easy to do on a Word doc, just pull up a Word doc or a text document on the computer, and let's just work through this. how many are we? How many are we today? Let's have a quick look.
I've got 2 rooms set up. I actually have 3 rooms, so we could split into 3 rooms.
Yeah.
Let-
So what we were thinking is we split you guys into a couple of rooms. We could go through these frameworks in smaller groups and kind of bounce back ideas. I think it's it's great to kind of sit here and just type away in silence, but might be a bit more exciting to kind of talk. So if we split you guys into 3 rooms, you can quickly go through the claims that you have. I would say we'll do 10 minutes if that works for everyone, um, just to get these written down. And this will be our live opportunity to actually, I'm happy to kind of do an audit of one of two and give direct advice on what that actually looks like in the real world and how you can kind of gather more attention from that. Does that sound like a good plan?
Yeah,
Awesome.
So
definitely does.
everyone understands what you're going to do, because I'm going to open up the rooms and pop you into rooms in a
Are
minute.
we
Yep.
gonna have a copy of the framework? Sorry, or should we like take a
You
screenshot?
Take a
you should take
screenshot if you can,
yeah.
because I don't think it will hold.
Okie
Yeah.
dokie.
And I've got it written down, and I'm going to join one of the rooms.
I'll try and join a couple as well.
Yeah, so perhaps I'll join one, and Kenneth, I'll put you in another one.
Perfect. So if we by 10 past 8, we'll kind of pull the rooms back, and then we can spend the last few minutes basically just working on the last part of the workshop.
Okay. Any questions before I send you off? All right, here you go. Not joined. Not.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Some of you might have got cut off mid-sentence, but
Yeah, nice to be back.
good to see your faces. I think,
So is everyone angry at me for closing down too soon? But that was almost 15 minutes, and we
yeah,
The
said
time was too
10.
short.
It was
no,
very short.
the
Yeah.
goal wasn't for you to finish all five. I skipped that on purpose because what I really want you to do is to just dive straight into it. You have the framework now to actually continue working on it. So if you haven't finished, use it going forward. We use it on a daily basis, even with clients that we've had for over a year. So it's not a case of, you do it once and that's it. Sometimes you'll go back and revisit it and realize the authority has changed and it's grown because there are more touch points. The way that you're reinforcing it has changed because you've realized there's new content marketing channels that you can use. But the whole point is basically understanding that this framework is yours. Hold it. Merry Christmas to everybody. Take that. So I want us to do a stress test, but I know that I want to keep the time. I want to make sure that it's a Monday night. You'll have things to do, and I don't want to steal too much of your time. So, Martha, you had your hand up.
Yeah, can you explain a bit more by what you mean by leverage? I was struggling
Sure.
with
Let me
that.
pull up
Give me
this
another moment
beautiful
about that.
slide first. There we go. Cool. Awesome. Oh, my screen has gone haywire. Cool. So where must this belief compound first? I think a lot of times when we're looking at like our stories, we like to think of it like it's one size fits all. So we're telling the story to B2C, B2G, B2C all at the same time, and they're all very different narratives. So the reason my leverage is there is as a reminder to say who's your audience essentially. Who is the person that you're speaking to, number one. But the more important layer below that is who is going to be the person that's going to help you move to the next milestone faster. So as an example, if it's institutional investment or it's angel investment or whatever the case may be, the story that you're telling, if it's raising funds, then you should only really care about telling a story that helps you raise funds at the very beginning. Then you can widen it out to, potential clients and things like that. But the very first story that you're drafting out, if it's at this point that we're speaking right now, not in terms of any stage, then you should focus on that core audience first. You can always widen the story out. What's really hard is to have a really broad story that doesn't really apply to anyone, and people go, nice tale, nice thing that you said, but I don't really know why it's relevant. So go to where you can leverage it first. Does that make a bit more sense, everyone? Cool. Awesome. We have time to do a live stress test, but we'll probably limit to one person. So who feels that they are happy to share what they've come up with? It doesn't matter whether it's finished, you don't have to have all 5 points. But who had a light bulb moment that they'd like to share that we can stress test?
I don't mind.
Go for it. Listen, I normally charge for these things, so be brave. Be brave and get some
Okay,
stuff.
okay. So do you want me to like go through all 5 points?
If you give me the kind of headlines, boom, clear, so CLEAR, just boom, 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 boom.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, cool. I'm building a platform for parents to be connected with childcare professionals, specifically childminders, not nannies, not babysitters. A lot of the times people confuse them. Why now? From personal experience, I really struggled. The journey has been so difficult finding my own childminder, and it just flagged up the issue of like the fact that they're all scattered everywhere, and there's not that dedicated space, which is what I'm building. Why must belief compound? The leverage, I would say, without the belief, I genuinely would be in my 9 to 5 right now. But I found a way, I managed to successfully find a way to still build it without use by finding another way of putting the business out there that doesn't put me in a position where I am risking my income. I am a single mum as well, so that's another reason why, financially, I'm not in a position to just walk. So
Just jump in there really quickly. On the leverage point, just
yes,
to kind of clarify a bit, maybe a better way of me saying it is who needs to hear this first?
the belief, you yourself, the person has to have the belief. Without you having the belief, I mean,
who's the person?
in my case, me.
But who's the person that's on the other end?
Sorry, what do you mean by that question?
So who is receiving? Because you are creating and giving. Who's receiving?
Oh, I'm not sure I follow your question.
So when we're looking at leverage and who needs to believe it first, essentially, I think from what you're building, the people that
Right. The people,
understand.
my target audience, they need to believe it.
Cool. Excellent.
And I've managed to convey that to a point which I won't mention the
Yeah.
indications of how I know I have conveyed that, but it's what I'm doing is working, and I haven't used myself as 100% is what I'm trying to say. And I wouldn't be able to achieve that without the belief that I have and convincing the audience that I'm creating it for as well.
Awesome.
The next point is the edge. I think for this one, I would say race is a big part in why I'm building this as well. Again, I don't want to go too much into it, but there's a lot of education that needs to take place in this industry specifically, which is what we're doing through our social media platform and things like that. The proof that compounds conviction, I was a bit confused by this, and I understood it as the authority to exist.
Okay.
That's how I understood it. And I believe it's the if not now, when?
Okay.
This is the only time for me, and we should exist, and we have every right to exist, not just for the people we're creating this space for, but also the people that for the future of childcare.
Yeah.
For the future of anyone that might be having children as well. So that's how I understood that question. And reinforcement, again, I was stuck on this one. How does this narrative scale without dilution? I understood this more as in like, how do you not lose yourself? And I think this goes back to the point leverage, in my opinion. If the belief is there, then the reinforcement will continue, but dilution will only happen if your belief becomes shaky.
Okay.
So I think all the points are kind of interlinked, in my opinion, and they kind of exist together as a unit. But yeah.
Cool. I love how you've basically given a really kind of personal perspective on how it is that you're approaching this and making sure that's kind of really intertwined into the story. I think something you should definitely keep going forward, because that's the part that people typically skip over and say, someone else can do that. What I would say is, interestingly, you've actually got a way simpler way of looking at this, where each pillar kind of does a bit of a standalone thing. So, by way of a claim, for example, what you're building and why now, what you're building is very clear. The why now, simply, I would say, is childcare costs are at an all-time high with no signs of going down. The why now isn't about your personal experience, it's by
Okay. I need to note that down.
It's not about your experience and what you do, it's about how the person receiving it is doing so.
Childcare costs. Okay.
And then by way of authority, what proof that compounds with conviction, the government released that parents can get access to 30 hours of childcare earlier this year or end of last year, I think it was. So this is proof that there is a need for something to change or something to shift. And that's leverage. And this is to make this clear to everyone, it's not just for you. The reason why we have all these steps is not about what your perspective is on these things. It is, how does this affect on a wider space? And I want you to kind of think of it as, if these were questions from an investor or someone who was, drilling you on what you're doing, how would you answer these to say, here's my claim? Not me as an individual, the company and the world around it that it's basically looking to protect. So
okay, I'm making notes, by the way. Thank you so much. This is all useful. Remove myself is what I wrote down.
Not remove yourself, but don't put yourself as the forefront. You're not
right.
There is a thing that I say to all founders, which is, as much as you're building a product, as much as you're building the solution, you are not the hero of the story. You are the guide. So if you're a fan of Star Wars, you want to be Yoda, not Luke Skywalker.
Okay.
Do all the training you can, but the big montage is not yours. And if you can do that really, really well, That's what's going to get you to the exit where, you know, you come to me and say, hey, I've made £50 million, $50 million exit. Ken, I really wanted to just give you half of it. And I'll say, fine, I guess we'll do that. Cool, awesome. With the time that we've got left, I'll speed through a couple of things just that I think are going to be relevant. So the first thing is, with everything we've discussed, we built a diagnostic tool that basically within 3 minutes gives you a score on where your narrative risk index sits. Essentially, it's going to help you understand the things that might be missing currently at your stage. It's designed for seed and Series A founders. What I would say, probably don't say this as publicly as I should, but to you guys, I'd say use it and find out, use the questions to understand and reverse engineer things that you're currently not doing, because most of the questions will highlight things that you should already be doing or shouldn't already be doing. And then the result that it gives you, the report that it gives you at the end, take that and diligently work on those things for the next 3 to 6 months. I say 3 to 6 months because not everyone at pre-seed is able to work full time, so there's that expectation is obviously a lot lower. Number two, it shouldn't be your main focus, but it should be a background focus. If we can tighten our narrative, we can open doors and unlock opportunity that are way beyond our wildest dreams, which we've seen within this presentation today. So I'll share a link to that in a second. The conclusion of everything we talked about basically here is you are in a beautiful position to build a narrative and infrastructure that gets people excited before they walk in the door. And when you compound that, you de-risk everything around you. You make people understand that not only are you the right choice, but also you've looked at this from all different angles. And if it's de-risked completely, there is no room or no opportunity for you to fail. And that's where real conviction sits. The moment you are able to provide that level of clarity to anyone, they'll make a decision. And that decision could be to buy from you, could be to invest in you, could be to work with you, could be to partner with you. Decisions are made once we have total clarity, and your job is to basically be the person that creates a narrative that does so. And the story is a bridge to impact wider investors. Most people think you've got outreach to 400 different investors, get rejected by 380, and then with those 20 investors beg for your life. What you want to do is be in a position where you speak to an investor, and as soon as they finish, they call up their best friend or their closest investor and say, hey, you need to jump on this because this is going to take over the world. If you were to look at it in terms of a very, very easy image of this, when AI came out, every single investor was very excited about backing any company that showed strong potential, strong traction within the AI space. This isn't a sign of the times. It isn't a change that's been happening the whole time. It was just very specific within that sector. You can leverage that same skill set by saying, look, the outsized returns look this way, and the story that I'm sharing with you is we see a future in which this is a reality. The only thing that's stopping us from getting there is a small amount of capital. And by small, today it will be 200K, next year it will be 1 million, and the year after that it will be 5 million. All of these checks become smaller and smaller and smaller as the company grows, because you get bigger opportunities and you have to, invest to kind of grow. So I want you to get really excited about the fact that you can ask for the money in a way that's by invitation, by sharing your story and saying, hey, here's a great opportunity. We'd love to have you on board, as opposed to, I need money, please help me. So I hope that I've delivered on the promises of helping you understand what narrative friction looks like. Also in being able to understand how to eliminate that founder drag and kind of get ahead of the stage that you're currently at. And in essence, use the clear framework to be able to move the company forward. You can take that framework to be able to guide you on how it is that you make posts, whether it's public or private, but you're just making sure that each and every single time that you're leveraging the correct things. You're sharing the story that actually shows who you are. You don't always have to start a video with your claim. You don't always have to start a text post with your leverage. These are just reminders of the wrapping of it, what you're doing, where it's going to. These things work in public and private as well, in person as well, sorry, I was going to say. So, with all of that said, I appreciate you for sticking with me to the end. I will share here a QR code of which you can do a couple of things. Number one, the diagnostics tool is in this link. So it's like a Linktree style image. And of that, you can book a call with me for 20 minutes, have a clarity call. You can use the narrative risk index and get your score and get a full report within 3 minutes. And there is also, if I'm not mistaken, a link to our Unfair Edge Bootcamp, which if it's not on there, it will be on the website, which is also linked in there. I will leave time for a Q&A. I understand that some of you will have to leave 8:30. I'm more than happy to stay on a little bit longer if Martha permits. But again, thank you all for your time. If we can't stay on for any longer, appreciate you sharing Monday evening with me.
Thanks, Kenneth.
Thank you very much.
Happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Yeah. One thing, so I have, there are 4 other co-founders with myself, and there is a kind of unique motivation, let's say, to what we are doing. The 4 other co-founders, it's a pair of father-son. I am the only outsider, and they are all very close. One of our business partners, one of the main founders, passed away very unexpectedly a couple of months ago. And so it's been a big motivation for a lot of the team, but that's also, it kind of, and I think touches on our passion for what we're doing, because it was his vision, but that's also very difficult and sensitive to communicate. And so, I just wondered if you had any, tips on how to kind of convey that while, it is still a very, sensitive subject, but it is one that I think we all believe, we want to share. It's just kind of difficult to do it. And so I just wanted to see if you had any, advice on how we could go about that.
I think the first thing I'd say is, one, I appreciate you for sharing that. I'm really sorry to hear that it's happened, and sending you as much as it's, might not need to be said, but I think it is worth saying. I hope that you're surrounded by great people at this time to kind of support you in the best way possible. And if you're not, you're making time for yourself at the very least. So that's the first thing I'd say. I think the second thing, by way of narrative and ultimately kind of keeping the legacy alive, I think it's dependent on the space and dependent on who you're speaking to. I think relevancy is a really key thing. I think there is a time and a place to say this is what will happen and it's spurring on our journey. And there's also a time and place to say, actually, do you know what? It's not relevant in this space because it doesn't contribute to what we're doing. It's not to say that the legacy is not being held, but I think it might be more relevant, for example, in an investor space, to say, excuse me, we're raising this amount of money, and there have been a few things that have slowed down because we have recently gone through a bereavement, and talk about how that's actually, 1, inspired you to do more, number 2, you're working more diligently, and talk about all the things that have happened since, right? That initially maybe you decided not to do any work and you've kind of jumped back into it. When it comes to the public side of things, I think it's worth talking about perhaps at a later stage. And when I say later stage, I mean once this is a very raw moment, the first 3 months, the world is still upside down. So what I'd say is be kind to yourself, take some time to actually just, be with each other, if that makes sense. And then when you feel, and I say this, like I can't give you a timeline, I can't say if it's a year or 6 months, but when you feel it's right to be able to share that perhaps more publicly, there is no amount of writing that I could give you that would match the level of passion, heart, drive, and love you have for that individual. And therefore, you will know when the time's right, and therefore, I think it's important for you to write it in the way that you feel is best. Write, post, whatever the case may be. Hope that's useful.
Yes, thank you very much.
Kenneth, I just had a really quick one, and it's in relation to the founder story aspect of things. When would you say is there a right time for a business to start knocking at doors for investors, or in your professional opinion, when would be the best time? Is it when the business feels like it's time, or how's that assessed basically? How do you assess that?
Hmm. How long's a piece of string? Um, I think, and Martha, you can back me on this one, I believe. There is a really interesting thing about investment where people will wait till they need the money and then go and chase it and then realize that actually the cycle they expected to get the investment in is way longer than they decided to,
Mm,
and end up like this with no hair. So to avoid the baldness, I would say it's never too early to talk to investors just to get an understanding of what it is that they want.
mm,
Um, because ultimately people see investors as this kind of like big scary machine that they only give money to the right people at the right time and it's got to be perfect. And it's like it is as an imperfect system as everything else in the world.
right, right.
Human beings who are motivated by emotions, as we all are, and signs of the times. So what you want to do is understand what motivates people as early as
Hmm.
possible. And
Right.
there's nothing wrong with saying to somebody, hey, look, we're going to be raising investment in the next year, 2 years, whatever the case may be. I'd love to understand the types of startups you invest in and why you might invest in them. Because then you're not actually
Mm,
asking for money, you're asking for advice. And investors
right.
don't mind giving advice, they do
Mm,
mind giving money. I don't know,
right,
Martha, if you
right.
have anything to add to that.
Yes. So in general, yeah, it never hurts to be building your relationships and to be
Mm,
building your infrastructure. Um, number one. Number two, yes, it's in the past, a lot of things have changed in, this is an entire presentation. So I'll try to be brief about it, but um, a lot of things have changed in the startup space in the past few years with the AI and with the political, uh, what do we call this,
Landscape.
craziness. So it takes longer to raise less money than it did before. So, but one of the things that a lot of investors look for, including myself, is your ability to run very lean, and your ability to have a lot of different options, so that if you come to me and you are desperate for money now, that is a reason for me not to invest in you. I'm sorry. But if you say, you know what, I'm committed to doing this, I'm going to do whatever it takes for me to do this, you investing in me helps me do it faster. And it's important because A, B, C, and D, which is
right.
true for you, like, because we need more healthy children. Um, and I'm going to do it whether you give me money or not. You give me money, it'll
Yeah.
happen faster because this is a really important thing to happen.
That's useful to know. Thank you so much for your advice, actually. Thank you.
Good, all good. Any more?
I had a
Ready.
question.
Kyle,
Yeah,
Kyle,
I knew
Kyle's got a question.
you
I
knew it
saw
was
it.
coming.
I knew Kyle never leaves without a question. Thank
I'm
you.
not
I love
giving
it.
up.
I love it.
Uh,
Go for it.
no, this story about Sam really was intriguing to me, just because, as I said, I'm in the ed tech space, um, and this idea of narrative telling in the academic space, because academics in general are very introverted. So there's not like there are academic influencers out there, but they talk about the next product, or they're pitching they're paying them to pitch stuff anyway. But there's nobody out there really explaining things like, for example, academic formatting in a very clear, consistent way. There's nobody talking about, so this point you made about, these quarterly updates about what's happening in the industry. Nobody's talking about like a weather report, so to speak, of what's happening in publishing, which is my sector, academic publishing, things like that. And there's a lot happening, but I don't see any kind of specific channels like that. I don't know if you think it makes sense for I mean, you know a little bit about my company, but not a lot. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on something like that for the academic space, ed tech space?
I flip the question back on you and say, if you were in an industry or a sector where there were 2 to 3,000 thought leaders on the same topic, all competing for a limelight, would you share your story?
Good question. I I think I would say that that's a lot of noise from who I've seen out there, and
Mhm. So
uh,
what you're essentially asking me is, you're in a space that has zero noise and you'd be the only voice.
okay.
The answer's in the question. I think it's a case of,
Mm,
if there's nobody within your industry, zero people, and let's say it's just country specific. There's no one in this country that is speaking about it. Great. Start
mm,
talking about it yesterday, because you'll be the
mm,
first person to talk about it, and then by way of everything else that comes with it, hiring, partnerships, investment, everything else, if anyone searches on that topic, you're the face that comes up.
mm.
So yeah, go make those millions.
Okay.
Kyle,
Thank you.
just sprint to mind. Try go into EdTech and L&D conferences. That will help you, to get a bit braver, you
Hmm.
know. Yeah, just be around people who are building tools. You'll see other professors that will help you to get much more on a high level of socialization, and you'll be much more comfortable sharing your story.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And actually, I met Martha at a conference. That's how we initially met. So I'm out there, meeting people. I find myself in random situations where I do meet people, as in even today, I met one of the early employees of Airbnb. He just happens to be living in the city that I live in. He's kind of like semi-retired. He's an investor. So I'm like, oh, this is like gold. So now I need to figure out, need to get my act together. But so I meet people. It's more, as I think I said before, this narrative. I think I need to improve and make it tighter, as you said.
You got the framework now, so it's
Mm.
good. We'll do one more question. I know that also we've gone over time quite a lot, so I want to make sure you guys spend the rest of your evening doing fun things.
Mm, yeah, Kenneth, would like to ask how to be if you are working in space, where, for example, like I'm in B2B marketing, and what I'm seeing, people who are interested, like shows the interest in like optimizing their messaging for AI, basically building content that gets them cited in AI. People want to somehow to connect it to return on investment. And in this space, like optimizations for AI, it's not really possible yet to do, to get some, it's possible like to do it, I would say it's by number of citations and everything, but it's hard to tie it to a real revenue generated from
Yeah.
it. Yeah, so it's basically my story should be based around some belief. So I'm struggling a bit how to people who are thinking very, very formally, and who understand that they need to market, how to switch them from this ROI set mind into a mind that is seeking upside benefit that is
Yeah.
not yet tied to ROI and revenue. Yeah.
Yeah. The interesting thing here is, upside benefits and ROI are all the same thing. They're just different shapes, colors. But it's the same thing, right? ROI can sometimes it's typically tied to revenue, but ROI sometimes can be reduced cost. Still a win. So I think two things we should make really clear when we're talking about AEO and GEO is
Yeah.
number one, early mover advantage. You're working in a space that is changing every single 2 weeks at this point, by way of like a significant change. And therefore you have to be up to date with absolutely everything, as soon as possible, living on Reddit and all the GitHubs of this life. The second thing is, there aren't many people that are talking about it by way of what it's solving for and also how difficult it is. So, much like to Kyle's point, if you can be the person that does show the upsides and the benefits of the early mover advantage, the first big ROI is, this is way cheaper than SEO, because ultimately no one understands it fully. The second thing is, by way of quantifying returns, we can't quantify what we can't measure. And we can't measure anything if we haven't given it a try. So I'd find a really easy value ladder to say, okay, cool, here is the minimal that I can do for very little cost, and get people to just do that as much as possible, because then that's going to give you those proof points of, this is going to go into business plan, but the proof points are basically how you can share that story of this person did this, these are the results that they got. It changes 2 weeks later, that's what they're hiring for. So it's less about it's difficult, it's hard, it's new, and more about it's going to be great, it's going to be fantastic, and we're piloting. It's that vision, the future piece.
Yeah, that's what I understood too. Yeah, you need to sell vision and explain that people will be buying and doing top funnel research through AI, so that you at least appear on short list to be selected later. Yeah, but yeah, I'm still figuring out how to sell vision. Like it's easier to sell for someone else to to sell their vision than your vision, at least for me.
Always think about it this way, and this is kind of the shortest master I can give you on vision, which is think about the company, how it will exist in about 5 years' time, and how you operate. And that is what you're sharing with people. It doesn't matter if the mechanisms are there right now, you're still optimizing towards that. So it's always going to be true. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I've taken more than enough of your time, so I really appreciate it. And Martha, I really thank you again for
Well,
having me.
Kenneth, thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Kyle.
What a
Thank you, Kenneth.
wonderful evening. This was really very helpful for me. I hope it was helpful for everyone else as well. And then yes, go chill for the rest of your evening. Some of you, I know it's more than just evening, it's quite late, but thank you very much for coming, and look forward to you guys coming again another time. All right.
Guys,
Thanks, Martha.
see you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Martha. Thanks, thanks, Kenneth.
Good.
All right.
See you
Bye-bye.
guys.
See you later.